This video is proudly sponsored by GT85. Hey guys, welcome to my first drive video on BMW's X1 M35i. Almost exactly a year ago, I was invited out to Germany by BMW for the unveil of this particular model. And since then, my first look video has done extremely well on YouTube. And I get messaged about this model on a daily basis. At the back end of last year, when I was out in Australia, I actually ran an iX1 30 X-Drive for a few days. That's the all-electric version of the X1. And you know what? I really enjoyed that car. It was perfect for the situation and the scenario that I was in at the time, i.e. living in and around Melbourne, which is a very, very busy city. Prices start at £49,400 for this flagship baby X1 here in the UK. And yes, you probably guessed it, this particular press car is pretty much fully loaded and retails at just under £60,000. Those options include this beautiful frozen pure grey paintwork, the optional 20-inch wheels, one of two optional 20-inch wheels in fact, a couple of packages inside the M Pro pack, I think it's called, and the Technology Plus package, and things like the pan roof. So it has pretty much everything, but still £60,000 for the smallest X model that BMW make. You can also get the X2 in this M35i trim. That's essentially BMW's 5-door coupe version of the X1. For me, it would be this one every day of the week because it's more practical and I think it looks better. Saying that though, the X2 M35i in the right trim actually looks pretty good. Certainly better than any X4 or X6. But saying it's better looking than either of those is basically saying that it's better looking than a naked mole rat. In terms of styling, well, it's not a bad looking car, but it is slightly odd and boxy looking from some angles. It's certainly no X5 or X5M. And BMW have added things like this quad tailpipe, which just doesn't make sense in my head. It also has things like those M-specific door mirrors, which we have seen trickle into the M lights over the past few years, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but I think BMW and BMW M are trying to bridge that gap. So if you buy one of these, you essentially feel like you own a full fat M car, which obviously isn't the case. Before we head around the front and talk about what's under the bonnet, we need to talk about this badge. As you know, I'm not the biggest M badge fan, and this one is no different. But what puzzles me with this car is it says M35i, but BMW have just announced that they're dropping the I on their combustion engine only cars. So the new M135i is now just called an M135. So this badge is already out of date on essentially a brand new model. Be interesting to see if that I just miraculously disappears over the next few months. Under the bonnet, we'll find the familiar B48, which is a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, except it's now been detuned to produce 300 horsepower and 400 newton meters of torque. I think it must be to do with emissions or EU regulations yet more, because in the States you still get the full fat with almost 320 horsepower, but over here we've now had to lose some power and lose some torque. But there have been changes in the gearbox department. So the 8-speed Aisin gearbox that was in cars like the outgoing M135i has now been replaced with a 7-speed dual clutch gearbox. I'm guessing that's going to give us quicker and more responsive shift times. And we'll talk more about that once we get the car out on the road. And all of that 300 horsepower and 400 newton meters of torque is fed. The end result is BMW claim this will do the 0 to 62 sprint in 5.4 seconds. Not bad for a car that weighs around 1,600 kilos and only has 300 horsepower. I'm delighted to announce that GT85 have signed me up as their automotive ambassador for the next 12 months. I've used GT85 since the mid to late 90s when I was a bicycle mechanic, and I still use it regularly on my bikes today. In fact, I use it around the house, and yesterday I actually used it on my M2 competition. For those of you that have M2s or most F-Series BMWs with exhausts that have valves that open and close, you're probably quite familiar with the squeaky valve noise. A quick spray of GT85 completely removed that annoying squeak and it runs like new. And whilst I was there, I used GT85 to clean my carbon exhaust tips because it's not just a lubricant, it's also a cleaner and degreaser, and it leaves a layer of protection. And on top of all that, it smells really good. I believe GT85 actually used lavender oil to give it that distinctive scent. For your chance to win 6 cans plus some other GT85 merch, I need you to follow GT85 on Instagram. Their handle is GT85spray. Need you to follow me on Instagram, and I need you to tag both of us in a story explaining what you use your GT85 for, or if you're new to the product, what you would use GT85 for. And the best answer wins that prize. Massive thanks once again to GT85 for sponsoring this video, and I look forward to working with them over the next 12 months. Jumping inside, and I think that's where this current X1, not just this flagship model, really starts to shine. It's lovely and spacious in here in the front and in the back. It's very practical. There's storage absolutely everywhere, USB-C sockets, all of the very latest tech, which we'll talk about in a minute. A reasonable sized boot at 540 litres, or if you fold those rear seats flat, you get 1600 litres. And something else to note about that boot is the underfloor storage it has. It's a really usable space. It's not just good enough for your phone and your wallet, but the biggest standout for me in terms of this model are these brilliant seats. I raved on about them in my first look video out in Germany last year, and I have to say they've been brilliant to live with. They're very comfortable, very supportive. The driving position is spot on, and these are the non-option cloth finish, and to me they're the ones that you should go for. They don't get too hot in this glorious weather. They don't get too cold during the winter months. And because they're cloth or almost Alcantara, you get so much more support in them than you would with the fake leather that you can spec on this car. I think BMW call it leatherette. What an awful name. In front of me, we get this new design wheel. It's a little bit girthy in places for my liking, but you do get these new style paddles, which are very similar to the ones that are in the current M2, M3 and M4. As we talked about on the outside, this particular press car is pretty much fully loaded, including things like the Tech Plus package, which includes options like the brilliant head-up display. This is a full fat head-up display. It's so clear, it works really well. I can display everything I want in the windscreen, meaning that my eyes are pretty much fixed forward all of the time. And that to me is a really good function in terms of safety, much better than any of these distracting lane departure tools that once again the governments are forcing on us and on modern cars. Everything has been simplified down here, including unfortunately getting rid of the brilliant iDrive controller, but this is fitted with the very latest operating system 9, essentially iDrive 9, which in the time that I've had to play with it is really, really good. It's quicker than the 8 and the 8.5. It feels far more like my smartphone than a car's infotainment system, if that makes sense. The graphics are sharper, everything is more adjustable, everything is more natural as well. And when I link my Android Auto up to the operating system 9, I also get directions and information in that head-up display, whereas that doesn't happen in my M3. So just small changes have made this system a lot better, but I do wish that there was still an iDrive controller down here. Right, let's get this car out on the road and see what it drives like. But before that, I'll just put my seatbelt on. The seat moves forward. That is a feature that you'd only ever get in cars like the flagship 7 Series. So once again, the X1 might be bottom of the rung, but this car really is loaded with tech. first thing to do is test out this car's claimed acceleration figures. BMW say it will do the 0 to 62 sprint in 5.4 seconds. Conditions outside are close to perfect. I'm in sport and sports automatic. My traction control and stability are also in sport, which I believe is the new MDM or halfway house, because if I shut all of that down, I can't seem to engage launch control. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Let me know in the comments below if I am. My Racebox Mini is now ready to go. Left foot is hard down on the brake, right foot on the accelerator, launch control active. Here we go. A little bit of a hesitation off the line. Those gear changes are so fast. And there we go. 4.87 seconds. That's to 60 miles an hour, but massively impressive. I think that's definitely going to be fast enough for someone buying an X1 M35i. Why do you need your road car to be any quicker than that? At least to 60 miles an hour. Definitely feels quicker than the 300 horsepower and 1600 kilos suggest. Let's go and see what it's like on the open road. Although we've already talked about the amount of optional extras this particular car has, thankfully the M35i does come with some useful standard equipment, including the adaptive M suspension. You always need some form of adaptive suspension if you live in the UK, because our roads in general are pretty average at best. That is then amplified if you tick the bigger wheel option, which this car has. So the combination of 20-inch wheels with low profile tyres and our roads, well, they always give you a bit of a choppy ride. And even when this is not back into comfort or the default mode, I wouldn't say its ride quality is brilliant, but it is acceptable. If you're after the best ride quality, definitely stick with the 19-inch wheel option. I haven't tried a car with 19-inch wheels, but I can tell you now that that slightly bigger sidewall on the tyre is going to definitely give you a slightly better ride quality. And the other end of the scale, when you hit the My Modes button down here and the Sport button up here, which is configurable to how I would prefer it in terms of throttle response, in terms of steering weight, I was going to say feel, but there's really not much steering feel, and in terms of that adaptive suspension, everything stiffens up and feels sportier. We'll pull this gear selector back one more and we've got sports automatic, and if I pull a paddle, it then gives me manual override over that 7-speed dual clutch gearbox. Let's push on a little bit now. Well, I've got loads of awesome displays in the head-up display and down here on the dashboard, very similar to what I would see in the full fat M cars. So not only are the revs going up, but I've also got almost like shift lights that appear and let me know when to change gear. The chassis, etc., feels a lot tauter now. The whole car feels more like a hot hatch than, let's say, a traditional SUV, and that's what you want in your M35i. So that side of things is really, really impressive. The gear changes, just put our foot down, pull it, instantaneous on the way up the gearbox, but on the way down there's a horrible delay. And actually, I'm not going to beat around the bush, my biggest disappointment with this car and this package is that 7-speed dual clutch gearbox. In the right scenario, let's say now, second gear, pull third, so good, so fast, it's so promising. But then when you want to go back down the box, there's a massive delay. And when you're in automatic mode, whether you're in sports or regular, I think they call it personal or comfort, it just doesn't know really what it's doing. It's a real clumsy calibration and really frustrating to use as a daily tool. And as most of you know, a poor gearbox really lets down a good package. And in terms of handling and outright acceleration and pace, well, this thing seems to have it, although on paper it seems a little bit down, and you wouldn't expect 300 horsepower to be that much fun in this day and age. But actually, as we discovered, timing it to 60, it's quick enough for sure, and in reality, well, it feels a lot punchier than 300 horsepower. Definitely feels like it's got a lot more torque than the quoted 400 Newton meters, because in any gear it will pull quite hard from low down. But this gearbox, it's just really clumsy and quite annoying. Also, I don't dislike them, but it does seem to have inherited some DSG style farts, which even DSG gearbox cars don't have anymore. I'll demonstrate, hopefully that mic will pick them up. And something else to talk about is this car's torque steer. It's maybe not such an issue today because it's 29 degrees outside and these tyres have got plenty of temperature in them. But this morning and yesterday and the day before, and in fact every day I've had this car up until today, it's really suffered quite badly from torque steer. And most of those days have been dry and relatively warm. So in the winter months, I can imagine it's going to be quite a problem. When this was initially delivered and I took it out for the first drive, it felt completely front wheel drive to me. I couldn't feel the rear axle doing anything. It was skating all over the road until I got a little bit of temperature in the front tyres, and it got a little bit better. But I was getting torque steer in up to third or sometimes fourth gear, which is very odd when you jump in a car knowing that it only has 300 horsepower, knowing that it's a brand new modern 2024 platform. It's built by BMW, and yet it offers you or gives you all this unwanted torque steer. Like I said, today it's actually been pretty much unnoticeable, but that's only because I've been driving this car for hours, doing flybys, doing launch controls. There's plenty of temperature in the tyres and it's nearly 30 degrees outside, so perfect optimal temperature for maximum grip. But let's face it, this happens 3 or 4 times a year in the UK, but for the other 360 odd days, well, yeah, it's gonna maybe be a bit of a handful. This is definitely a model I've been looking massively forward to getting my hands on, but unfortunately over the past 5 or 6 days of driving it, well, it just hasn't met my expectations. As a package, it just doesn't seem to come together that well, and I can't get my head around the base price of £50,000. Let's just push it through here. It does put a smile on my face, apart from when I pull that left paddle and it only seems to work 50% of the time. It is capable, I'm sure of that. It's probably more capable than the M135i hatch on a typical A or B road, because you've got a better, more commanding driving position. You can see further down the road, you can spot those potholes, you can spot the oncoming traffic, pedestrians in the road, cyclists, etc. But yeah, as an overall package, it's just a bit disappointing. It's definitely no X3 M40i, that's for sure. As you can probably tell, I'm really struggling to come up with a conclusion and summary of this car. It does so many things really well, but it also has a couple of fundamental flaws, including that really frustrating gearbox. And I think the gearbox alone would put me off ever owning or buying one. But that might not be as annoying for a lot of potential buyers. But make sure you do test drive your X1 or your X2 M35i's before you sign on the dotted line, because that might frustrate and annoy you. Everything else, well, underneath it's an X1, and I love the current X1, whether it's in full electric iX1 trim or any of the lower combustion engine versions. I think they're all very, very good. They're great packages, they're very practical inside, very spacious, comfortable, and although we know this car's almost 60 grand, the fit and finish in here is really, really nice. It feels premium. You feel like you're sitting in a BMW. You don't feel like there's been too many corners cut, and I think that side of this particular car is really good. But again, you get that in all X1s across the range. Just the rest of it, I don't know, I guess my expectations were just a little bit too high, and that can sometimes be dangerous when you're looking so forward to driving a car or borrowing a car like this one for a week, and then you finally get it and you're like, it's not what I thought it was going to be. Hopefully this first drive video has made some sense, and hopefully you can understand my frustration. This isn't a bad car, but I think it could be so much better. I do worry about the brand new, that I haven't driven yet, M135 hatch that doesn't have the I anymore, because that has exactly the same running gear as this car, including this 7-speed dual clutch or no clutch gearbox. I really hope that the BMW engineers can somehow at least speed up those downshifts, because they are frustratingly slow, and I hope that they can also engineer in slightly better software in terms of when you're using this gearbox as a normal automatic gearbox and you're not overriding it, because it is quite clumsy at times. Thanks for watching, take it easy, and I'll see you at another video very, very soon. Cheers.